Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that takes a huge pile of research, expert takes, books, articles, all of it, and we boil it down to give you the sharp insights you need.
Helping you get genuinely well-informed on complex topics.
Exactly. And today, oh boy, we are diving into a big one, a name you've almost certainly heard, especially in business circles, Ray Dalio.
And specifically, his hugely influential book, Principles.
Right. It's presented as this almost revolutionary guide to success, and it's built on these core ideas he really champions. Radical transparency and something he calls an idea meritocracy.
It does sound pretty compelling on the surface, doesn't it?
Incredibly. I mean, think about it. An organization that's supposedly engineered to get rid of ego, to build this super high-performance culture.
And where everyone is constantly going through, as Dalio puts it, learning and personal evolution. It sounds like, the dream setup for a genius-level company.
Where truth is king and improvement is almost algorithmic.
Uh-huh.
But, and this is the big but we're tackling today, it runs through all the sources we looked at. Is this system really the guaranteed path to genius and growth? Or does it maybe risk creating something else, something more like a culture of fear?
Or constant surveillance. Maybe even a kind of groupthink, ironically.
Precisely. We're really going to be looking closely at that very fine line. The one between tough, necessary self-improvement.
Which everyone needs, to some extent.
Absolutely. But the line between that and the potential psychological toll, what happens when feedback is that intense, when performance demands are that high?
It's a critical question.
So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack a whole stack of sources. And these aren't just repeating Dalio. They offer really different views, different angles.
Giving you, the listener, a much more rounded, nuanced picture of what these kinds of intense organizational structures actually imply.
And we'll make sure to define some of these key terms as we go, like radical transparency and idea meritocracy, just so we're all clear.
That's good. Let's get into it.
Okay, so where do we start? Maybe with Dalio's own perspective. What was he actually trying to achieve?
Yeah, I think that's the right place. If you look at Principles itself, Dalio's intent seems, pretty noble, actually. He's tackling a really basic human thing. Resistance to change.
Which is hard for almost everyone.
It really is. And Dalio says, let me quote him here, "Recognize that change is difficult. Anything that requires change can be difficult." Pretty straightforward.
Okay.
Yet in order to learn and grow and make progress, you must change. So there's the imperative.
Right. Change equals progress.
Exactly. And then he says, when facing a change, ask yourself, am I being open-minded or am I being resistant? It's about self-reflection.
Turning the lens inward.
Right. Confront your difficulties head on, force yourself to explore where they come from, and you'll find that you'll learn a lot. So it's not just accepting change, it's actively digging into the resistance.
Confronting difficulties head on, that sounds potentially uncomfortable.
Absolutely, and he knows that. What's really interesting is that he doesn't just say, do this. He actually talks about how to help people through it. He acknowledges the pain.
Okay, how does he suggest doing that?
Well, he advises leaders to, and I'm quoting again, help people through the pain that comes with exploring their weaknesses. So acknowledge the pain up front.
Right. Don't pretend it's easy.
Precisely. Emotions tend to heat up during most disagreements, especially when the subject is someone's weaknesses. Very true. So his advice is, speak in a calm, slow, and analytical manner to facilitate communication. Try to de-escalate, be rational.
Keep the emotion down.
Yeah. And then frame it. Put things in perspective by reminding them that their pain is the pain that comes with learning and personal evolution, and that knowing the truth will put them on the path to a much better place.
So the pain is framed as a positive sign, like growing pains.
Exactly. It's the necessary discomfort of evolving. And he even suggests, consider asking them to go away and reflect when they are calm and have a follow-up conversation a few days later.
Give them space to process.
Right. It's a surprisingly, almost therapeutic approach described there. Acknowledge the pain, guide them through it calmly, frame it as growth, lean into it.
Okay, I have to admit, the intention there sounds really positive. Growth, truth, evolution, these are good goals. Building better people, stronger organizations.
It's hard to argue with the goals themselves.
No, absolutely not. But that phrase, confronting difficulties head on, even delivered calmly, it immediately makes me think, what happens when this a very analytical, sometimes brutally honest theory hits actual human beings.
With all his sensitivities and defenses.
Exactly, all the messy stuff. Dalio's approach seems to demand a very high level of emotional maturity and maybe a specific personality type to really thrive in it.
That's a fair point. It's noble on paper, but the real world.
Yeah, where does the theory meet reality? How do other experts see this whole process of giving and receiving such intense feedback? Because I feel like that's where the potential problems might start.
It's definitely where the nuance comes in.
Because we're talking about criticism, right? And criticism is such a double-edged sword.
Absolutely. You need it to improve, but it can just as easily make people dig their heels in.
Right, or shut down completely. And Daniel Goleman, the emotional intelligence guy, he wrote something in the HBR 20-Minute Manager series that really pushes back against Dalio's focus on weaknesses.
Oh. What does Goleman argue?
He basically says, when you criticize someone, you make it harder for that person to change, which is pretty counterintuitive to Dalio's whole model.
Wow, okay. So criticism hinders change. How?
Goleman suggests that positivity can go a long way. Instead of just hammering on the flaws, he says asking about someone's hopes, dreams, and possibilities can open him up to more effective work.
So focus on the potential, the aspiration, rather than the deficit.
Exactly. Build them up towards what's possible rather than making them dwell on the pain that comes with exploring their weaknesses, as Dalio puts it. It's a fundamentally different psychological starting point.
That is a big difference, shifting from fixing problems to building on strengths and aspirations.
And it's not just Goleman. We also saw Robert Posen talking about the delicate art of giving feedback. The title itself says a lot, doesn't it?
Delicate art. Yeah, not brute force truth-telling.
Right. Posen implies it takes real skill, nuance, tact. It's way more than just being transparent. The how matters immensely.
Which suggests that maybe Dalio's calm, slow, analytical delivery isn't enough on its own if the underlying context isn't right.
Exactly. Get it wrong. And even well-meant critique could just destroy trust. Which leads us straight into this really crucial idea, psychological safety.
Okay, let's define that quickly.
Good idea. So psychological safety is basically the shared belief held by members of a team that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. It's feeling confident that you won't be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes.
Got it. Feeling safe to be vulnerable, essentially.
Yes. And this is where the blue ocean leadership approach offers a really interesting contrast to maybe more radical transparency. They stress creating a safe environment for learning.
And how do they do that?
Well, they use these things called as-is leadership canvases. Think of them like maps showing where leaders actually spend their time versus where they should be focusing.
Okay, visual tools for feedback.
Right. But here's the key difference. These canvases are shown and discussed only at the aggregate level during big leadership fairs.
Ah, so it's anonymized, collective data, not individual callouts.
Exactly. And the reason this matters, according to the source, is that this collective approach makes individual leaders more open to change because they feel that everyone is in the same boat.
Shared vulnerability, safety in numbers, kind of.
Right. Now, compare that to a system where your specific weaknesses, maybe your individual baseball card stats, are potentially public knowledge or subject to very direct, maybe even public critique.
That feels very different, much more exposed.
Totally. Instead of we're all working on this together, it could feel like I'm the one under the microscope. And that could just kill psychological safety, making people less open to change, not more.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And that idea of psychological safety, it's the absolute bedrock in Patrick Lencioni's work, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. He talks a lot about that fear of vulnerability topic and the need for trust.
Right. The foundation of his pyramid. Absence of trust.
Exactly. And Lencioni really hammers home how incredibly hard it is to build that trust and change a culture, especially one where, office politics are ingrained.
Yeah.
He notes, 2 years of behavioral reinforcement around politics is a tough thing to break.
2 years.
And one lecture, no matter how compelling, is not going to do it. The painful heavy lifting was still to come. That just highlights the mountain Dalio's approach has to climb in practice.
Yeah, you can't just declare, we have radical transparency now, and expect genuine vulnerability overnight.
Not at all. It takes consistent, demonstrated safety over a long time. It has to be earned deeply. You can't just mandate it with principles.
And this difficulty, this fragility of vulnerability, it connects to what Angela Duckworth wrote about in Grit, doesn't it? That fine line she mentioned.
Yeah, the line between tough love, which can be incredibly motivating, and what just feels like bullying.
And what determines which side of the line it falls on?
Duckworth suggests it's almost entirely about the recipient's perception. It's not just the giver's intent. She quotes someone pushing their kid, saying, "I knew the decision was mine." It wasn't about him and what he needed. It truly was, "I'm giving you all I got."
Okay, so the recipient felt the support and genuine care behind the push, and felt they still had agency.
That seems to be the key. Does the person receiving the feedback, however tough, believe it's genuinely for their growth delivered with empathy and that they still have some control? Or does it feel like criticism for criticism's sake or a power trip or just unfair?
So, Dalio's calm, analytical delivery might still be perceived as bullying if that underlying trust and perceived positive intent isn't there.
Absolutely. Intent isn't magic. Perception is reality in these interactions.
And what happens when that perception is negative? When people don't feel safe, how do they react? The managing your boss source had some insights there, right?
I did. It paints a picture of what happens when feedback channels aren't safe. Some managers, it says, will just swallow their anger and behave in a very compliant fashion when the boss makes a bad call.
They just go along to get along, even if they disagree.
Right. Or they might swing the other way and start seeing the boss as this all-wise parent figure who knows best, basically abdicating their own judgment.
Neither of which sounds very good for the organization.
Not at all. In both cases, genuine critical feedback gets stifled. Dissent disappears. And that completely undermines the whole point of an idea meritocracy.
Let's quickly define that one too.
Sure. An idea meritocracy is supposed to be a system where the best ideas win out and get implemented, based purely on their merit, not on the rank or status of the person suggesting them.
So hierarchy doesn't matter, only the quality of the idea.
Ideally, yes. But if people are too scared to voice dissent, or to challenge the status quo, or to offer a different perspective because they fear criticism or looking weak,
then the best ideas might never even get heard.
exactly. The meritocracy fails because the input is filtered by fear.
And the source mentioned another reaction too, didn't it? The opposite of compliance.
Yeah, the other extreme, the counter-dependent manager. This is the person who sees the boss as the enemy and actively resists or disengages.
So either silent compliance or active resistance, both driven by a lack of safety.
Pretty much. Both show how a perceived lack of psychological safety can just cripple an organization's ability to harness its collective intelligence. It makes that goal of a true idea meritocracy incredibly challenging to actually achieve in the real world.
Building an environment where people feel genuinely safe to disagree, to challenge, to be wrong, that's really, really hard work.
It really underscores how the how of feedback and the whole environment around it is maybe even more important than the what. It's not just about truth. It's about creating conditions where truth can land constructively.
Well said.
Okay, so that's the feedback loop itself. But what about the wider context? The pressure cooker of a place striving for extreme performance where everyone's constantly measured, rated, maybe even publicly.
Yeah, the constant evaluation aspect.
Ben Horowitz, in The Hard Thing About Hard Things, really gets into the sharp end of this. He asks this gut-wrenching question leaders face.
I remember this one.
How do you tell her that despite the massive effort and great job she is doing today, you might fire her next year if she doesn't keep up with the changes in the business? Oof. Yeah, that's brutal honesty.
It is, and it highlights the relentless pressure in a system that emphasizes, well, radical transparency. Let's define that too.
Okay.
Radical transparency generally means a system where almost all information, performance feedback, how decisions are made, maybe even those individual metrics or baseball cards Dalio uses, is open and visible to pretty much everyone in the organization.
Total visibility.
Right, and continuous reevaluation. Imagine working under that constant shadow, knowing that even great work today might not be enough tomorrow. The potential for anxiety seems huge.
It really does, a constant feeling of precariousness.
And Horowitz makes another crucial point. It's not just about the person being let go. He says the message is for the people who are staying. The people who stay will care deeply about how you treat their colleagues.
Ah, the ripple effect on the survivors.
Exactly. Even if Dalio's system, with its algorithms and baseball cards, aims to be perfectly objective and fair, if people perceive that performance decisions, especially firings, are handled coldly or unfairly,
It creates fear among those who remain.
totally. They might think, that could be me next. It could just shred loyalty and trust, even if the system claims to be fair. That underlying psychological safety takes a massive hit.
Which, again, undermines collaboration and risk-taking.
And this whole idea of public ratings, these baseball cards, it made me think of a line from The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
What's that?
It is much more ennobling to the human spirit to let people judge themselves than to judge them.
Internal versus external judgment.
Yeah. And the source adds, and in a high-trust culture, it's much more accurate. In many cases, people know in their hearts how things are going much better than the records show.
That's interesting. So self-assessment in a high-trust environment might actually be more accurate than external metrics.
It suggests that, yeah, and makes you wonder if a system of constant, transparent external ratings, however data-driven, actually fosters the deepest kind of self-awareness and intrinsic motivation.
Or does it just incentivize people to manage their rating,
Hmm.
to optimize for the metrics rather than genuinely improve?
That's the risk, isn't it? Focusing on the score, not the learning.
Yeah. And this connects to something really fascinating and maybe a bit concerning from Nassim Taleb's The Black Swan. He talks about our limits in understanding complex systems.
Right, the limits of prediction and the power of the unexpected.
Exactly. He points out that history and societies do not crawl, they make jumps. And crucially, humans are great at self-delusion when we look back and try to create neat stories about why things happened.
We love finding patterns, even when they aren't really there.
We do. And Taleb even says, provocatively, that sometimes information is bad for knowledge, especially when dealing with rare, high-impact black swan events.
Yeah.
And that we're effectively not skilled at intuitively gauging the impact of the improbable.
So, having more data, more transparency, doesn't automatically mean better understanding or prediction.
Not necessarily, according to Taleb, especially for the really big, unexpected stuff. There's a risk in a system like Dalio's, which relies so heavily on data and principles, maybe especially in volatile markets, of creating a false sense of security, mistaking all that information for actual foresight.
Thinking you've got it all figured out because you have the data, but missing the potential for a huge, unforeseen jump.
Right. And Taleb also notes the appearance of busyness reinforces the perception of causality, of the link between results and one's role in them.
Okay, what does that mean in this context?
Well, in a super transparent, data-heavy system that tracks everything, it might create an illusion that you can precisely link every outcome to a specific action or person.
Even when reality, especially in finance or complex business, is way messier with tons of external factors.
Exactly. You might over-attribute success or failure based on the visible data, missing the real, often hidden or random drivers. It creates an illusion of control and understanding that might not hold up.
That ties into a really thought-provoking, maybe even slightly chilling idea from Shoshana Zuboff's The Age of Surveillance Capitalism.
Ah, yes. Zuboff's work. What's the connection?
She talks about this shift, how surveillance capitalists went from just using automated systems to know about your behavior,
Collecting data.
to using those systems to actively shape your behavior in line with their interests. She says, this decade-and-a-half trajectory has taken us from automating information flows about you to automating you.
Wow. From knowing to shaping, automating us.
Yeah. Now apply that, even metaphorically, to an organization with intense data collection and feedback like Bridgewater. Even with the best intentions, personal evolution, not profit, could that constant tracking, the metrics, the baseball cards, the nudges from the principals, could it subtly start to shape behavior?
Nudging people towards a predefined optimal way of being, as defined by the system.
Right. Could it inadvertently move from helping you evolve to subtly automating you, eroding genuine individual agency under the guise of data-driven improvement?
That's a really provocative parallel. The line between being informed and being conformed could get very blurry indeed.
It feels like it could. And thinking about tough cultures, we can also look at Michael Lewis's Liar's Poker and his description of Salomon Brothers back in the day.
A classic of the genre.
Yeah.
What stands out there?
Well, Lewis describes how Evu often faced cruelty that wasn't personal but ceremonial. He calls goofs mistakes a rite of initiation.
Hazing, basically, to fit into the culture.
Pretty much. It shows how these intense, critical environments can become normalized, even seen as necessary for toughening people up. But, as Lewis implies, it comes at a human cost.
The psychological wear and tear.
Exactly. So it makes you ask, how does Dalio's system of, let's call it principled toughness, avoid becoming its own kind of ceremonial cruelty, especially for people who aren't naturally wired for that kind of constant direct confrontation?
That's a great question. Where is the line between rigorous development and just damage?
And Liar's Poker also touches on loyalty, right?
It does. Lewis talks about loyalty being sealed by money, by the huge bonuses.
Right, the transactional loyalty.
But then he asks, how can you speak of loyalty to the firm when the firm is an amalgam of small and large deceptions and riven with strife and discontent.
Ouch. So, if the underlying trust isn't there, if people feel the place is full of conflict, or maybe even ethically dubious.
Then transparency and meritocracy alone might not build real loyalty. You might get compliance, you might get people sticking around for the money, but not that deeper connection or commitment.
Which ironically seems counter to Dalio's goal of building a strong, cohesive culture based on shared principles. If the intensity breeds discontent, the whole thing might fray from within.
And it certainly highlights the potential fragility.
Okay, so these sources really paint a picture of the potential downsides, the shadow side, of extreme transparency and performance focus. Human psychology, trust, fear, they all play a huge role.
They absolutely do. Intentions aren't enough.
Which brings us to maybe the biggest question of all, universality. Does this system, which Dalio developed and refined at a very specific place, a hugely successful hedge fund, actually work everywhere else?
Is it a one-size-fits-all solution?
Exactly. Is it transferable? Because good strategy, bad strategy makes a really strong point about context.
What does it say?
It says flat out, to create strategy in any arena requires a great deal of knowledge about the specifics. There is no substitute for on-the-ground experience.
So context is king. Specifics matter more than universal rules.
That's the implication. A set of powerful principles developed in finance might just not fit the bill in, say, creative industries or healthcare or education, where the specifics are totally different.
The physics of the environment are different.
Right. And the source adds, you can choose how you will approach a problem. You can guide your own thinking about it, which emphasizes individual judgment and agency.
Which might clash with a system where principles or algorithms heavily guide the thinking, potentially stifling unique approaches.
That seems to be the tension, yeah. What about the innovator's dilemma? That book throws a real spanner in the works for good management concepts.
Oh, Clayton Christensen's work, yes. That's profoundly relevant here.
It presents this amazing paradox, right? The management practices that allow companies to be leaders in mainstream markets are the same practices that cause them to miss the opportunities offered by disruptive technologies.
The very things that make you successful now can make you fail later when the game changes.
Exactly. In other words, well-managed companies fail because they are well-managed. It's such a powerful idea.
It really is.
So applying that here, could a system like Dalio's, which seems optimized for excellence and efficiency in a known environment like hedge fund trading, could it actually hinder the kind of messy, uncertain, trial and error stuff you need for true innovation?
For exploring the unknown, the disruptive, where the metrics aren't clear yet and the principles might not apply.
Precisely. Could Dalio's good management actually be bad management if your goal is radical innovation or navigating total market disruption?
It's a fundamental challenge to the universality of any single management system.
And the book pushes us, the reader, you, our listener, to think, do you think that the definition of what constitutes good management is changing? Will listening to customers and careful analysis always be the right move? Or could they become bad management in some contexts?
And it asks, what kind of system might combine the best of both worlds? How do you get efficiency and adaptability, execution and exploration?
It really opens up the need for flexibility, which ties directly into leadership that gets results.
Daniel Goleman again, right? On leadership styles.
Yes, and the message there is crystal clear. The best leaders don't know just one style of leadership. They're skilled at several and have the flexibility to switch between styles as the circumstances dictate.
So adaptability in leadership is key, not rigid adherence to one principled style.
Exactly. It directly argues against a single, fixed approach being universally effective. You need a toolkit, not just a hammer.
And that idea of context and adaptability links really nicely to how organizational culture actually works, according to strategic flexibility. It's not just one thing.
How does that source break it down?
It points out that culture, much like strategy, exists on two levels.
Yeah.
The deliberate, what the company says its culture is, like Dalio's principles.
The official version.
Right. And the emergent, what the culture actually is on the ground in different teams, departments, locations.
How things really get done day to day.
Exactly. And the source finds that these emerging cultures are not only different than the deliberate strategy, but also different from emergent cultures in other divisions.
So even within one company committed to Dalio's principles, the actual lived culture in, say, the trading division might be wildly different from the culture in HR or engineering.
Very likely, yes. A top-down, one-size-fits-all set of principles might just not take root in the same way everywhere. the local context, the nature of the work, the specific people. It all shapes the emergent reality.
Which makes the idea of transplanting the entire Bridgewater system somewhere else seem even more challenging.
Definitely. And you see this stark contrast in context when you look at something completely different, like the early days of a high-tech startup. Think about Elon Musk's description of it.
Oh yeah, the eating glass and staring into the abyss line.
That one. It paints a picture of chaos, uncertainty, sheer willpower. And apparently, Tesla's early manufacturing plan was described as haphazard. They were relying on a miracle is going to happen.
That sounds like the polar opposite of Dalio's meticulous, principle-driven, risk-mitigating approach.
It really does. It suggests that certain kinds of creation, especially groundbreaking innovation, might actually thrive on ambiguity, improvisation, maybe even a bit of messiness.
Things that a system built on radical transparency and eliminating bias to principles might struggle to accommodate or might even actively stamp out.
Possibly. It's about having engineers who just really liked cars and figured things out as they went along, a very different energy than optimizing known variables based on established principles.
Okay, so context, adaptability, the limits of universal principles. These are major themes. And there was one more piece, right? The nudge idea.
Ah, yes. Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein's work on choice architecture. This offers a really different lens on how to shape behavior.
Let's define that term too.
Good call. Choice architecture refers to how choices are presented and how that presentation influences the decisions people make. It's about the design of the choice environment.
Like how putting healthy food at eye level in a cafeteria makes people more likely to choose it.
Exactly. Or the famous example of making organ donation the default option on driver's license forms participation rates skyrocket. Policymakers use these subtle designs, these nudges, to achieve goals without forcing anyone.
Okay, so how does that apply to organizational culture?
Well, it suggests that creating a positive, effective culture might be less about imposing rigid principles or demanding radical transparency, and more about thoughtfully designing the environment.
Designing the systems, the processes, the way feedback happens, the way meetings run, to make the desired behaviors easier or more likely.
Precisely. Using nudge for good, as they say, it's a more subtle, potentially more human-centric approach than top-down mandates.
Yeah.
It focuses on making it easier for people to do the right thing, to learn, to contribute, rather than just telling them they must or measuring them relentlessly.
So less about blunt force transparency, more about clever, thoughtful environmental design.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
It's another angle suggesting that simply stating principles, however sound, might not be the most effective way to foster genuine change and positive behavior.
Wow. Okay, that was quite a journey. We've really unpacked the layers here, haven't we? From Dalio's ambitious vision to all these counterpoints and nuances.
That's the complex.
We've seen this core tension playing out again and again. The drive for truth, for growth, for meritocracy through radical transparency.
Versus the deep human need for psychological safety, the risk of creating fear, and the absolute necessity of leadership that adapts to the specific context.
And what keeps coming through loud and clear across all these different perspectives is the human element. You just can't engineer it away.
No system, no matter how clever or well-intentioned, can ignore basic human psychology.
Right. Real change, real evolution. It seems to depend so much on understanding how people actually open up to learning and improvement, not just what data you throw at them or how intensely you critique them.
Trust, autonomy, safety, connection. These aren't just nice-to-haves. They're fundamental.
They're the engine, really. And that engine runs on more than just logic. It needs empathy. It needs context. It needs to feel safe.
Absolutely. Which I think leads us to a really potent final thought for you, our listener, to chew on.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, think about this connection. Way back, Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations noted something interesting about labor. He said, the subsistence of the laborer is very different upon different occasions, more liberal in a society advancing to opulence than in one that is standing still. Basically, how we value contribution depends on the context of growth. Then fast forward to Peter Drucker, writing in Managing Oneself. He points out a modern dilemma. In a knowledge society, we expect everyone to be a success. This is clearly an impossibility.
Right. Success implies failure must also exist.
Exactly. Drucker continues, for a great many people, there is at best an absence of failure. Wherever there is success, there has to be failure. And then the crucial part, and then it is vitally important for the individual to have an area in which he or she can contribute, make a difference, and be somebody.
A place to succeed, to feel valued, even if it's not hitting the absolute top metrics everywhere.
Precisely. So, putting these together, here's the question for you to ponder. In our world, which is increasingly obsessed with metrics, data, constant feedback, radical transparency, a world that often implicitly expects universal success, how do you personally, and how do the organizations you're part of, make sure that this relentless drive for excellence doesn't backfire?
How do we prevent the fear of failure from totally eclipsing the joy of learning, the spark of creativity, the basic human need for connection and contribution?
Yeah. Or, put another way, how can we create environments that demand rigorous accountability, which is necessary, but also provide unwavering psychological safety? How do we ensure that Dalio's pain of exploring weaknesses genuinely leads to growth and breakthroughs?
And not just to people complying out of fear, disengaging, or burning out.
It's that balance, that incredibly delicate, absolutely vital balance we all need to navigate.